Chapter 2: Construction starts before construction. In this chapter, I want to talk about something that most property owners completely underestimate: the pre-construction phase. Honestly, this is probably the most important part of the entire project. Even though it is the part people are usually most impatient to get through, most owners want to get to the exciting part. They want plans, bids, permits, demolition, visible progress. They want to feel like the project is moving, and I understand that. But what I have learned over the years is this: the quality of the pre-construction phase usually determines the quality of the construction phase. Meaning, if the planning phase is rushed, unclear, or incomplete, construction usually becomes more stressful, more expensive, and more reactive. But when pre-construction is done correctly, everything downstream tends to improve. Communication improves, budgets improve, schedules improve, decision-making improves, and owners feel more confident throughout the process. What pre-construction actually is. A lot of people hear the word pre-construction and think it just means getting plans drawn. But pre-construction is much bigger than that. Pre-construction is the entire process of preparing the project before physical work begins. This includes things like defining the vision, testing feasibility, building the budget, clarifying scope, understanding risk, planning the timeline, selecting the right team, comparing bids, reviewing contracts, and organizing communication and decision-making. That is all pre-construction. This is where most major project decisions are actually made. Not during construction, before it. Why owners rush this phase? One thing I see all the time is owners trying to move through pre-construction too quickly. And usually, it is not because they are careless. Usually, it is because they are excited or overwhelmed, or they feel pressure to move. Sometimes they already talk to contractors who are asking for plans. Sometimes they are worried about rising construction costs. Sometimes they are emotionally ready to just get started. And sometimes they think planning is slowing the project down. But here is what I want you to understand. Planning is not delaying the project. Planning is protecting the project. That is a completely different mindset. Because if you skip clarity early, you usually pay for it later through confusion, delays, change orders, and stress. The illusion of movement. One of the biggest traps in construction is confusing movement with progress. A project can feel busy and still be unprepared. You can have contractors walk the property and still not have a clear scope. You can have plans and still not have a realistic budget. You can have bids and still not understand what is actually included. You can have permits submitted and still not have aligned expectations. That happens more than people realize. And sometimes owners feel relieved just because things are happening. But activity alone does not mean the project is healthy. The real question is, do we actually have clarity? Because clarity is what creates control. The cost of unclear decisions. One reason pre-construction matters so much is because early decisions are cheaper to make than late decisions. That is important. Changing something on paper is actually easier than changing it during construction. Once materials are ordered, crews are scheduled, and work is installed, changes become more expensive emotionally and financially. I have seen owners make layout changes during framing, tile changes after material orders, fixture changes after rough plumbing, lighting changes after electrical work. And every time that happens, it affects something else: schedule, labor, coordination, budget. That is why I encourage owners to slow down during pre-construction and make as many major decisions as possible before construction starts. Not because every single detail must be perfect, but because clarity early creates stability later. The real purpose of pre-construction. The goal of pre-construction is not perfection. It is alignment. Alignment between your vision, budget, scope, timeline, expectations, and team understanding. When those things are aligned, projects tend to feel smoother. Not easy, but smoother. because now everyone understands what they are trying to build, what matters most, what risks exist, and what success looks like. Without that alignment, construction starts becoming reactive very quickly, and reactive projects create emotional fatigue for owners. Pre-construction is where owners gain control. One of the reasons I care so much about this phase is because this is where owners gain the most leverage. Once construction starts, momentum takes over. Crews are moving, materials are arriving, money is going out, decisions become more urgent, but before construction begins, you still have space to think strategically. You still have space to ask questions. You still have space to compare options carefully. You still have space to identify risk before they become expensive. That is powerful. Most owners do not realize how much control they still have during pre-construction. This is why I tell people, do not rush through this phase where you still have the most ability to shape the project intelligently. What good pre-construction feels like. A lot of owners ask me, how do I know if pre-construction is going well? Good pre-construction usually feels organized, not rushed. You feel like questions are being answered, not avoided. You understand the direction of the project. You understand the budget range. You understand the scope. You understand what still needs clarification. The team communicates clearly. Risks are discussed openly. Assumptions are identified. The process feels structured, not chaotic. That does not mean every answer is perfect immediately, but it means the project is moving toward clarity instead of away from it. The biggest pre-construction mistake. If I had to point out one major mistake owners make during pre-construction, it would probably be this: trying to get final answers too early from incomplete information. For example, asking for exact pricing before the scope is defined, asking for guaranteed schedules before permits are approved, asking contractors to commit to details that have not been decided yet. Construction does not work well when the project itself is unclear. And sometimes owners become frustrated because they want certainty before enough information exists to create certainty. That is why pre-construction is a process, not just a single step. The project becomes clearer as decisions become clear. The owner's role during pre-construction. During pre-construction, your job as the owner is not to know everything. Your job is to lead intentionally. That means ask questions, clarify priorities, communicate honestly, define goals, review documents carefully, understand your budget, understand your risk, and avoid rushing major decisions emotionally. You do not need to become an architect or engineer or contractor, but you do need to stay engaged because no one else has the same level of investment in the outcome than you do. Final thought. If there is one thing I want you to remember from this chapter, it is this: construction starts before construction. The planning phase is not separate from the project. It is the foundation of the project. And when that foundation is weak, the project usually feels unstable later. But when pre-construction is thoughtful, structured, and clear, everything downstream gets better. Communication improves, decision-making improves, budget control improves, and owners experience less stress because they understand what they are stepping into. Do not rush the phase that protects the entire project. Before you build the structure, build the clarity first. Thank you for listening to Before You Build It. If you want additional planning tools, resources, or guidance for your own construction project, visit goeasyproject.com/beforeyoubuildit. The link is in the description or summary. And if you are preparing for an ADU remodel, addition, rebuild, custom home, or major project, you can also schedule a complimentary project strategy session there.